U.S. nationals were trying to go over to Britain, I believe it was, to play this game. A game that originated in theory by the North American natives. But they wouldn't honor their passports over there. They were representing the Haudenosaunee people. And it was a huge controversy. And it was wasn't about because they couldn't play the game. It was because in the Treaty of 1794 that I talked about in the beginning, that Corn Planter was instrumental in forging with the United States, it says that we have absolute sovereignty. So like we have our own passports. We don't have the passports that most people have. We have our own passports because in the Treaty of 1794, they said we are a sovereign nation and we are governed unto ourselves and they don't interfere with us and we don't interfere with them. But again, all the time, our sovereignty is challenged all the time. And this was just a big example. It was in the news and all that type of stuff too, because they wouldn't let our team, they wouldn't honor our passports. And so it's not about the game that wasn't played, that they weren't able to get into. It was about the fact that the government, in their own words, documented words, said back then that the treaties are the supreme law of the land. Like, you make a treaty, that's it. There's no other things that change it. We have tons of treaties with the United States, and they've all been broken. So it's kind of like speaking out of both sides of your mouth. You know what I mean?
Double tongue.
Yeah.
Forked tongue.
This shows some women's pictures of some women playing. Typically, the game was not played with women in the beginning, but nowadays, as times change, as you see, our paths have changed. We're on this plank road here. You know, times change. Now women play the sport of lacrosse.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How does the sovereignty affect, like, for example, New York laws, police officers, or do you guys have to still abide by the laws of the state, or?
That's a gray area for us. We have Seneca Nation marshals. They don't have the authority to arrest people. But on our territory, there is laws, not really written laws, but if something bad happens, the state troopers or the sheriffs will be called in by the marshals to help take care of whatever matters. It's a really weird situation. You know what another weird situation is? We're in the Salamanca. City of Salamanca, the majority of those people are non-natives. They have a lease agreement with the Seneca Nation, so technically, this is the only place in America where there's a non-native city that is on a territory. It's a really unique situation, which is also can be a troublesome one too, because when those lease agreements ran out I think it was in the 90s, they had to renegotiate all those leases from 100 years ago. But the city of Salamanca, it got pretty ugly. You know, because you got these people that are non-natives that have lived there their whole life. They've paid for their houses and all that stuff, but they were in jeopardy of losing all that if they didn't get a new agreement with the Seneca Nation, because technically all those houses are on the Seneca Nation land.
So the Salamanca is you all's tribal land,
It's
territory.
our land, but they have their own like city there where there's actually like cops that are non-native and stuff, and they have their own little mayor and stuff. But it's all
In Salamanca.
In Salamanca.
They have their own.
They have everything, but it's all on Seneca Nation land. So it's a really weird. There's no other situation like that in the United
So they
States.
can those police officers, or will they take you guys to court, or will they arrest you guys, or how does that work?
They can arrest us. Yeah, they can arrest us. It's a really weird situation. I don't really have all the details on it because I don't understand it. I've tried to learn a little bit about it, and I still just don't get how that all works, honestly. But this is a cool exhibit about tattooing. So most cultures across the world have done tattooing in their existence. This just talks about a little bit how we tattooed. Oftentimes we would use things like these gar teeth here, or even those thorns, and that's what we would use for needles. Of course, we didn't have any metal needles. The ink was made from oftentimes the soot of fires. and that would be blended in a mix to create the ink. What's interesting about some of what we did is typically when you think of old tattooing, you think of like either the stick and poke, where you dip it and then you stick, or like I think the Hawaiians and those type of people, I think they have this machine, not a machine, but a thing where they just tap it. Well, what's interesting about one of the things that we did is we would do all the puncturing first. Do the puncturing of the design till it bled or whatever, then take the soot mixture, or the ink, I guess you call it, and then rub it into the skin, and then that's what created the design. So there wasn't really a stick and poke type of thing, or mixing the ink. That was done at the end, when you rubbed it into the punctures. So that's an interesting. And then it just shows, of course, current communities tattooing to this day and why they get them. It's like any culture, you get them for whatever meaningful reason, what they mean to you personally. So. This little area here is pretty cool. If you want to take a picture here, this is a good spot. This is like just to honor our iron workers. There's a huge community of native iron workers going back for a long time. Actually, in places like New York City and stuff like that, there's established communities, like a block or two, that are just Haudenosaunee people living in like New York City that are all iron workers that have slowly established these little communities in those big cities. Because what they do is they have to go out there and work, do the iron working, and then send money back to their family. You know, nowadays you got casinos and people still do iron working, but back then it was like you had the iron work, there was like a select few things that our people had to do to support our families. You know what I mean? So this is just to show that. And what happens is it looks blurry, but I mean you're even welcome to put on the hard hats or whatever or not. But you stand here and you take a picture, it actually clears it right up, and it kind of looks like you're standing on this iron right here. And this picture was actually taken right here in the building of the building. So that view out there is literally the view if you were to take out these walls. That's the community out there. So it's an opportunity if you want to take a picture there. This little area here is pretty cool. I like it. It's about the Indian Arts Project, something that Franklin Roosevelt started. One of the many things he started, president, after the Depression and all that, because he was trying to get people back to work. One of the things that they did was they hired native people, Haudenosaunee people specifically, in this case, to recreate objects. A lot of the objects are in New York State museums. These are some examples that were made. So they were paid to make these things, is basically what happened. It's a source of income, and it's a source to also preserve some of the objects for collections, museum collections and stuff like that. So that's kind of interesting.
That is interesting.
So what we have over here is the old council house. So before we had that nice admin building over there, and there was a couple buildings before that, but in the 1950s and before, there was a council house, and it actually still stands. It's down the road. Maybe Arnie will take you there if you're interested. But this is a picture that was taken in there during the negotiations of the Kinzua Dam issue, which we're about to talk about. And I believe the windows and the doors are original to the original structure. But this just goes to show this is how our people used to. They would gather in this one big room. It's not a very big building. If he takes you over there, you'll see it's not big at all. And that's where the government would make their decisions. In this case, they're talking about the Kinzua Dam, which is what we're about to talk about right now. So this river here that you probably crossed over on the way over here, I'm sure, is called the Ohio River. What that translates into our language is beautiful river. That's what we call it. It's a beautiful river, Ohio. What happened is, starting in the 1700s, the city of Pittsburgh started experiencing a lot of flooding. So it really came to a turning point And there was a bad one in 1906 that caused tons of damage. 1906 Pittsburgh. What happened is that's when the talks first began about a dam for Pittsburgh because it was devastating the economy, it was killing people. And then in 1936, what they call the Great St. Patrick's Day flood occurred. It flooded Pittsburgh, caused $50 million of damage. And that was basically the turning point where people like Mr. Hines, the businessmen, and other businessmen in Pittsburgh and local politicians began lobbying to Congress to do something about this flood control problem that they were having. So later in 1936, with all the support of the politicians and stuff, they signed the Copeland Omnibus Flood Control Act of 1936. What that in essence did is gave authority to the Army Corps of Engineers, the United States, to build a dam to help protect Pittsburgh from those devastating floods. Well, the reason that that's important to us is because what that dam was ultimately going to do, and what it ultimately does do, is it floods 1/3 of our territory out here in Allegheny. 1/3 sounds like a lot, but it's actually 10,000 acres. So 10,000 acres of our territory gets flooded every year due to this dam. So there was no negotiations in that council house that we saw. That was them trying to figure out ways to fight this dam. You know, initially John F. Kennedy, when he was a senator, he supported the Seneca's efforts to stop this dam. But what you'll see here is a copy of a letter that John F. Kennedy wrote, because what happened is he was running for president in 1960. Pennsylvania is a very key state. He really needed to win that state. So in essence, what happened is he went back on his word. It's a common theme. And he wrote the letter to the Seneca Nation president, Mr. Basil Williams, stating that unfortunately now it's not possible to halt the construction of the dam. So one of the best places to live, especially back in those days and prior times, before all this technology and different jobs were available, you live by the river because you're close to water, there's good fertile soil down there, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of people lived next to the river. So it wasn't like they just flooded it and everybody, affected a few people. It affected a lot of families. They were forced to relocate. In some instances, and you see in this picture, Army Corps of Engineers would just burn their house down because they had to move. So they would bulldoze them, they would burn the houses down. You'll hear some of our elders, who are elders today, but they were children back then, tell stories about them riding up to their house with their parents, and they're just little kids, and being stunned at seeing their house on fire.
Wow, that was crazy.
And this happened in 1960, so we're not talking 500 years ago. This wasn't that
1960, they burning down their houses. Yeah. Army Corps of Engineers.
Army Corps of Engineers.
Burning down their house
right.
to do the dam.
For the dam. What's interesting is the Seneca Nation employed the help of one of the most prominent engineers in the entire world. His name was Arthur Morgan, and he developed an alternative plan that was going to be better. But the Army Corps of Engineers turned it down, obviously. But what's interesting is the reason that they were able to justify doing that to the Seneca Nation is that department, they're responsible for this initiative, was put underneath the War Department. So based off of this law of eminent domain that the United States used, they were able to, again, break the Treaty of 1794, because in the Treaty of 1794, we're supposed to have free use and enjoyment of our lands. That's literally what it says. Well, among other things. Basically, it means that we are our own people. Nobody can...
You're a sovereign people.
Yeah.
You have your own government. You have your own laws.
So again, this broke the Treaty of 1794. It's just a reoccurring thing. But it is what it is. It happened. Our people are a resilient people, and that's what this wall is all about right here. So when you stand here, you might have already noticed it. You look at this mural, if you stand right here, these two walls kind of become one. It's like an optical illusion in a way. Mm-hmm. And that's just to show what our elders, who are elders now, what they saw as the dam was. It was scary to them, a huge insurmountable thing that they're not going to be able to get past. How are we going to ever recover from this devastating catastrophe that's flooding 10,000 acres of our land, or losing our houses, our cemeteries and stuff like that? That's what they saw. But then when you walk through this door, it's just kind of a way of symbolizing how our people have gotten past the dam. And right here, what we have is another game that we still play to this day. It's called Snow Snake. So these long wooden snakes, if you will, that you see on this wall, those are called snow snakes. The ones behind you that are smaller, those are called mud cats. So the men would and still do make these, and they have these games in the wintertime where they build this long track, and they see you can throw these snakes the farthest. And some of those people can throw for like a mile or so. They can really throw them. It's a game that's still played. It's a thing that only men play. In that picture that you're walking up to, there's an Onohsagwe as a young man is in this picture right here, the one that the building's named after. That's him right here.
Mm-hmm.
This little display here was something that we were working on before COVID. And we'll still get to it when we get our staff back on. Is a little nice wall about all our donations. We bring another case out or whatever because we get a lot of donations. Sometimes we'll acquire things for our collections through purchasing, but not very often. But this is just we get a lot of gracious offers from people that donate a lot of really nice things to us. So we just want to try to acknowledge those people for their generosity. So this would be like our donation, our new donation wall. Because we don't want to just take these great objects and if they don't fit in with our current exhibits, we don't want to just put them in collections for nobody to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So this here is what we call our center gallery. Right now is the remnants of an exhibit that we had here. This is basically a revolving gallery area where we have art shows, different part-time exhibits, I guess you can call them, that aren't going to be up for too long. We can constantly change it too long. Add different exhibits, do different things. We have little performances in here. People can have their meetings in here. When we had a big celebration, and we got the phone plan and point tomahawk back, we had that whole thing in this room. When the New York State Museum gave us back the pipe tomahawk. So that's what this room is for. It's a great space. And these images that you're seeing are part of the exhibit that was done by Seneca, who's a Seneca woman. And what she did was, her art is a little different than most art that we show here. That's kind of the point I want to expand the art that we show here. What she did was she took these old photographs of her family and kind of obviously focused in on the eyes. There's eye in the nose of the soul, if you will. It's a cliche, but to kind of like, we should really look at these people in their hands, of course, over here. A lot can be said about people's hands.
Who's this?
I believe that's one of her relatives, Rosie Seneca.
Oh,
She
okay.
just blew that picture up, obviously, and then she created this two-row wampum type cape, I guess you could call it. Two-row wampum meaning based off the original two-row wampum belt, which is another agreement that was made by the indigenous people. And what that belt basically represents is you got two people traveling the same path. In the actual belt itself, it would be all straight. It would just be two lines, side by side. So what that would signify is that our people are traveling in our direction, doing our thing. Then you got the non-native people, they're traveling also side by side. but they're not touching each other, they're not interfering with the business of each other, they're not getting involved with their domestic affairs and their fighting and all that. We're supposed to just be two people living side by side harmoniously together. That was an agreement. That was an agreement.